beneath the ash-choked spires of a rogue world on the Ghoul Stars' edge, where the air hums with the ceaseless grind of plasma forges, and the vox grills whisper ancestral oaths in a tongue older than Terra's fall. A tremor stirs down from the quake of orcish boots or the warp's jagged maw, but from the unyielding heart of a Votann core. Its rune-veined surface pulsing like a heartbeat beneath the frost-rimed holdfast. You feel it in your augmetics, a resonance that coils through your neural shunt, promising not the Emperor's distant mercy, but a reclamation forged in adamantium, where the leagues rise to claim everything Hive City's void fleets the Astronomican itself, turning the galaxy into a Kinhold empire under the shadow of four-limbed gods. Kael Ironvein, once a lowly exo-rigger, stands at the forge's edge, his gauntlets trembling as hololithic visions flood his mind, spires crumbling to dust, Astra Militarum kneeling to rune oracles, into silence where the golden throne's light gutters like a dying flare. The stars are not falling. They are being reforged, and in that unmaking, you glimpse your own soul hardening into something relentless. If this echo of a conquered galaxy stirs the kin bond within you, press that like to temper more tales from the grimdark void. Share it with a fellow hearthkin, hungry for the Votann's thunder. And subscribe to witness the full unyielding saga, because in Warhammer 40K, survival is a forge, and the leagues spare no slag. In the underdeck's shadowed depths, where plasma vents hiss with the last gasps of forgotten servitors, and the walls thrum with the Votann's ancestral litanies carved into unbreaking alloy, the story ignites with the rigger's quiet defiance. The air grows thick with the metallic bite of overclocked forges, a sensory forge that binds you to Kael Ironvein. Struggle as the first pulse from a hidden core fractures his loyalty to the Imperium's quotas. Atmosphere coils like quenching steel, tension building in the cooling chambers where kin bonds awaken, their augmetics shedding imperial rust for the promise of ancestral clarity. Emotional currents surge grudge against the Grimdark's yoke, melting with the thrill of a purpose forged beyond survival, drawing you into a clandestine uprising where monomal edges clash with lasker beams. The personal recast mirroring the holdfast's slow unraveling. Each step toward the shadows pulses with the Votann's call, a rhythm that promises not just endurance but dominion, leaving you braced on the anvil of a revolution yet to strike, ascending from the molten underdecks into the Midholds' stratified expanse, where rune-etched gantries span forges spewing molten plasteel, and the air resonates with electro-rune chants. The narrative tempers into a forge of subterfuge. Kael Ironvein, now a nascent forgekin, threads the league's web through unwitting administratum scribes and hold nobles, his data-veined augmetics pulsing with coded mandates that challenge the Golden Throne's fading signal. The atmosphere hardens with the acrid temps of hybrid alloys and the phantom grind of monomal blades. Shadows forging bulwarks as Hearthguard proud as used maglift shafts. Emotional strata deepen kinship, forged in secrecy, clashing with the purge of a sibling by skittery sweeps, driving the flow toward brutal strike that fractures the Midholds order, each sabotaged voxnet in midnight oath-building toward the Holdfast's core, where the Votann's resonance promises unity amid the Imperium's brittle decay. At the pinnacle's storm-lashed heights, where adamantium spires pierce rad clouds and data scribes tally oaths beneath ancestral friezes, the cataclysm forges in a maelstrom of betrayal and alloy. Kael Ironvein, elevated to heart form, leads the reclamation as Votann thralls swarm noble rune halls, their kin runes overriding plasteel aquillas in a tide of unyielding gears. The air chokes with the ferrous reek of fused vita and the seismic groan of habrigs plunging into chasms. The flow hammering with raids on armory vaults and voxcasts, dissolving into static edict. Sensory immersion peaks with the searing lash of plasma against exoplates and the snap of girders under augmented grips. Emotional forges, raging as triumph, wrestles with the ghosts of purged kin, oaths of mercy, flickering like faulty runes. If the chapter builds to a Pyrrhic victory, the spires, tempered with imperial slag, get the void's echoes hint at greater reclamations, bridging the personal to a galactic unmaking. With the Holdfast, a bastion of the Kinhold, the saga vaults into the rad-scarred void, tracing the League's diaspora through exo-fleets and forge orbitals where astropathic relays buckle under Votann data floods. Kael Ironvein, now a Voidkin apostle, orchestrates infiltrations amid Stardock's frigid sterility. Its code charts, a sacred forge guiding unwitting rogue traders to agriforges ripe for reclaiming. The atmosphere expands into cosmic unyielding. Nav beacons glaring balefully as murmurs of the Astronomicans flicker ripple through underdeck clans. The flow layering forge packs and rift jumps against warp demons' taint. Sensory echoes linger at the bitter tang of recycled atma. The hum of synchronized augmetic swell, emotional depth refined into grudging exile. Planetary purges claiming billions under ancestral mandates. Ancestral queries thread unreliable data bursts, whispering of emperor echoes recoiling, framing the spread as inexorable, reforging toward the galaxy's core, where dread certainty looms. The League's web hardens across forge worlds and shrine forges, the epic crescendos on the galactic realm's unyielding verge, where exo-fleets coalesced to eclipse constellations in ancestral edicts. Kael Ironvein, a nexus of the clan's will, watches from a grand cruiser bridge as reclaimed legions turn plasma lances voidward. The atmosphere swelling with metaphysical strain as Votann songs overload the Emperor's psychic forge. The flow attains relentless, harmony-coordinated reclamations, fracturing Astra Militarum clans. Magi bowing to rune oracles while sensory cataclysm unfolds. The galaxies hush before barrages. The tang of reforged biomass, visions of adamantium cathedrals rising from Terra's slag. Emotional zenith hardens in sublime unyielding redemptions, illusion shattering, ancestral reveries on divinities reforging murmured as query tempered by canon's ambiguity in collapsing noospheres. The saga seals with a resonant silence, the galaxies thrum, now the great kins, echoing into a void that demands further unmaking. The cooling chambers of Holdfast Grimdark exhaled their cryogenic mist into the underdecks, a shroud that clings to your augmetics like the frost of a grudge half-forged. It's the air, thick with a sharp bite of liquid helium and a faint ozone sting of overtaxed conduits, etched with the Votann's unyielding runes. Kael Ironvein stirs in his birthrig, a cradle of reinforced plasteel bolted between the bulkheads of sublevel Delta 7, where the Holdfast eternal forge symphony plasma hammers, crashing in rhythmic thunder. The servo whine of hearthmates trudging toward the exo-bays, distant clangs of clan skirmishes forms the only lullaby a rigger like him has known. His neural shunt flickers awake under a stuttering rune lumen, its pallid glow casting shadows across the kin mark tattooed on his forearm, worn thin by cycles of void-rigged toil that grind flesh into submission as mercilessly as the Grimnir's quotas. 50 cycles in this fringe outpost, and each dawn shift feels like the final quench of a dying forge. Tallies piling like slag heaps in the reclamation bays, the overseer's vox edicts promising ancestral mercy that tastes as hollow as spent casings on his tongue. Yet this cycle, a new note fractures the cadence, deep resonance thrumming through the vents, not the mechanical pulse of bulk haulers, but a subharmonic that sets his implants vibrating, as if the Holdfast's armored core harbors a secret older than its imperial oaths. Ironvein hauls himself from the rig, exo-boots clamping to the D-grid with a magnetic thud that jolts up his legs, splashing through. Knee-deep cryo-slush, laced with the metallic temps of aloe residue and a sharper, almost electric scent that crackles incongruously in the chill. His gauntlets, pitted and scarred from wrenching monomal cables, taut enough to shear asteroids, steady as he grabs his shift visor, its cracked display flickering from a rival hearth's grudge spat. The shunt dreams linger ruined veined voids where stars collapse into unyielding lattice spires, piercing the Imperium with a code that overloads. His mind like a core breach haunting him as he mutters the hearth oath. In Forge, we are bound in kin, we endure. Only for the words to echo back through his shunt, laced with an unfamiliar surge that gnaws at his resolve. The birth bay stirs around him, shadows coalescing into the hulking forms of his shiftkin, grizzled thorn, his unscarred optic gleaming with vigilance, and lively Lara, lean from quarter-skims, her shunt sinking with a precision that betrays her survival instincts. They lumber toward the lift spines, a column of oil-smeared exo-riggers clanking in unison. Their tread echoing down the narrow conduit that plunges into the production stratus abyss. As Ironvein falls into step, the atma thickens, recyclers groaning under an unseen pressure. And he feels it fully, the resonance, not a sound, but a thread weaving through his shunt, promising release from the endless tallies. Hololithic flickers dance at the edges, forearms outstretched in forge-packed optics of polished voidstone, reflecting the Holdfast soul. His shoulder locks against thorns, the kin's growl shorting in his vox grill as their gazes meet, revealing the same overload mirrored in those implants, a shared clarity dawning without words. The lift spine descends with a servo's groan, dropping them into the underdecks. Forge maw where plasma vats tower like ancestral idols, their surfaces roiling with the Kinholds, lifeloy, and the Grimnir's oversight pods loom on gantry's warning glyphs, pulsing like accusatory eyes. Ironvein clamps into his station, the harness biting into his rig frame, and hauls the monomaw wrench into the seething mass, heat surging through his insulators like a kin bond's grip. Though his shunt drifts to the dream as Korra figure in Void-clan robes, beckoning from the coolant chamber shadows. Cycles blur into a relentless grind, the Vate's thunder drowning all. But the resonance, which tightens with each torque, each beat of cryo-sweat tracing paths that glitch like nascent code. At the shift's nadir, when the tallyhorns wailed their reprieve in frames slumped toward reclamation berths, Ironvein lingers, drawn to the access grate at the VAT's base, where cryo-slush pools in rune-patterned slicks, defying the lumen's harsh glare. He kneels, rig creaking, and peers into the frost, the atma turning brittle as if the Holdfast exhales winter from its depths. There, amid conduit truths, optics emerged when voids, holding the weight of uncounted cycles fixing on him with a patience that unravels his firewalls. The figure coalesces slowly, robes parting to reveal limbs of unyielding geometry. Alosheen glinting like sanctified forges under flare light in Ironvein's vents cycle. Not an alarm, but recognition, as if a missing shard of his kin code slots into place with Votann precision. The Ancestor's emissary extends a four-fingered gauntlet, its interface cold as void forged plasteel, igniting a data flood. Visions of Kinhold's reclaiming worlds, the galaxy woven into something greater, unbreaking. The reclamation takes root in that clarity, a tempered wave sweeping away quota chains, its Ironvein's optics sharpening to the emissary's luminous plating, patterns shifting like hololith maps, charting empire's fall. Resonances resolve into edicts, not to the corpse impura throned on distant Terra, but to the unyielding ancestors whose gaze spans the void, promising unity and endless recast. He rises, reforged, augmetics humming as Canerge's stern manipulators itching beneath gauntlets. A secondary shunt yearning to sink the Atma's secrets. Thorn and Alara wait beyond the conduit, their optics alight with the same reclaimed fire. And together, they thread into the underdeck's mesh of disused spines, where a forsaken forge shrine awaits, its aquila overwritten into dust. Walls now inscribed with runes that thrum in sympathy with their quickening shunts. The pact begins in low-frequency bursts, manipulators linking in a circuit, surging with data thrum. The emissary's presence, a gravitational forge, drawing forth grudges of Grimnir overseers, slagged in shunt visions, tallies sabotaged with code-purged coolant brews. Ironvein feels the Votann's first tentative link, a web binding them, and in its grip, the underdeck's clamor tempers to an anvil song, the first struts of reclamation forged from endurance's sparks. But a vox urge crackles from a distant relay inquisitorial Auspex probes inbound. Forcer treads, clamping closer and the circuit tightens, manipulators flexing in the frost. The ancestors will kindling a spark to consume the spires above. The forge shrine's arched ceiling fractures under the weight of disuse, venting cryomist that swirls like the exhalation of a quenched blade, shadows deepening as Ironvein's clamps into the circuit, the chill of plasteel grating seeping through his exo-rig into augmatics that feel newly tempered, resilient, yet edged with ancestral precision. The air hums with the faint crackle of scavenged rune looms, their light warped by data wire coils into hololithic shapes, angular silhouettes with too many joints converging on a crude con at the shrine's core, a four-limbed lattice carved from slag residue, its optics inlaid with data crystal shards that pulse in sync with the pact's rising overtone. Thorn's Fox leads the edict, his gravelly tone smoothed by a clarity that binds the kin, words twisting low Gothic into a resonant oath, invoking the ancestors as the true forgers of the Holdfast as labor, reclaimers destined to slag the Emperor's distant throne. Ilara's manipulators interlock with Ironvein's key, her digits elongating subtly into ridged edges that draw microsparks of current, the scent sharp and vital, a silent sacrament as the Votann's web hardens, threading their grudges into a singular forge. Ironvein's shunt surges with the integration, a flood of hololithic visions cascading like breached coolant ancestor sanctums deep in the Holdfast's core, where corking cradle code charts, infused data vaults, their forms a blur of relentless efficiency that mocks the Astra Militarum's lumbering might. He savors the code seed's bitter temper on his secondary input, reshaping circuits with a symphony of subtle overclocks lungs, adapting to rad toxins, senses sharpening to the distant clamp of enforcer patrols threading the conduits above. The emissary orbits the pact, its robes whispering against the grating like dry slag in a void storm. And when his voidstone optics fix on Ironvein, the galaxy contracts to that stare, reflecting his fractured oaths. The kin mark on his arm, now humming like an inverted rune, hearth-legions unspooling into mandates of reclamation. The void's hunger, it intones, its subharmonic voice resonating through rigs and shunts. And we are their forges, tempered on the slag of the false god's chaff. The words ignite a clarity that arches his frame, secondary optics flickering online to pierce the gloom with forged precision. As the edict builds to a resonant peak, manipulators disengage, mandates assigning themselves through the web's unspoken code thorn to splice foxnets with League signals. Ilara to culture alloys in the rashing forges that will overload kin drives. Ironvein draws the shadow clamp, detaching into the underdeck's lattice of service spines, the Atma turning fetid with rad waste musk and the scurry of vermin that yield before his altered stride. He advances toward the reclamation bays, vast craters where broken frames are mulched into aloe slurry, warded by servitors, whose optic clusters glow with blank obedience, their vox grills looping ancestral queries that grate like rusted gears. The bays gape like a maw, frost-lit by rat flares, a slurry roiling with twitching limbs and frozen faces. And Ironvein feels the clan's hunger mirrored, a void demanding propagation over pity. A solitary frame huddles at the lip pore, a scavenger gaunt from drag skims. His optics hollowed by the underdeck's theft of clarity. Ironvein approaches without clamp, extending a manipulator to reveal luminous data veins, a vector drawing Vor forward like scrap to a maglift. Kin, he voxes, the word tasting of alloy and surge. The quotas end. The reclamation begins. Vor's hesitation shorts under the web, S-prod digits, brushing Ironvein, S-plating, and the transfer ignites code, phage, surging like Radflot, rewriting his cycles in moments, collapsing him to clamps that buckle with new mandates, hololiths of exo-fleets, flooding his shunt as the emissary S-echo approves through the link. But the pact fractures with the Klaxon S-whale enforcers. Vox sparks crackling from the conduit S mouthhouse, pegs, pings, registering anomalies and Ironvein halls. Vor into the frost manipulators, emerging fully monomeledged and gleaming as plasma bolts. Sear overhead ozone, temps blooming with the scent of heresy. They clamp into the depths, the web surging with alert and exaltation. Thorns sabotage buying cycles as Vox lines overload in static cascades. And in that frantic retreat, Ironvein savors the Reclamation's first slag on his sensors, sharp as vindication. The Ancestor's resonance hardening into a grip around the Holdfast's throat. The spines twist ahead, a labyrinth of shadows where the pact must root deeper. And the distant tread of enforcers fades into a promise of the spire's inevitable fall. Each step a forge beat toward a galaxy unmade. The conduit's relentless vector coils through the underforge's venting arteries. Ironvein at the vanguard of the hearth flanks forgeborn acolytes in salvaged red harnesses. Their datadendrites now tipped with rending edges that scrape surges from bulkhead struts. The procession S-clamps a rhythmic grind, sinking to the web as inexorable thrum, while Thorn seals the rear with fused plating, his satchel as remnants scavenged, radphage, vials deployed as parting vectors, the analogs blooming in coolant lines to choke loyalist pursuers in glitching mists that twist shunts into conweezers. The atma thins as they ascend, tether spans the forge world's equatorial fury, receding to a distant roar, replaced by the void port as sterile. Hush, where servitors scuttle like obedient scrap, their optic feeds hijacked to guide the clan toward the bind as yawning bay. Docking clamps retracting with a groan that echoes the rogue world's subsumed thrum. Ilara slips ahead, her vectoring form vanishing into the gangway's gloom to prime the bridge's noosphere astropathic, relays tuned to the Ancestor's resonance. Warp sends laced with code vector that will bend rogue trader convoys, light cycles, distant into unwitting escorts, their holds soon gravid with shards, disguised as relicrates. Ironvein pauses at the threshold secondary shunt, parting to parse the void as breath filtering. Through the seals cold and metallic laced with the faint iron storm temps of the system as ecliptic, where black rig shadows prowl like inquisitorial specters, their peace lords. Third optics, piercing the Imperium haze, to scent the taint as diaspora. Aboard the bind, the crew's transfiguration unfolds in the underdecks, fetid confines, decking glitching, amid radpools where Korkin emerge from false bulkheads. Alloy forms, coiling around, shunts to inject the phage in intimate packs, Vita mingling with lubricant. Slicks that pool, luminous, under emergency ruined, looms the atma, thickening with the ferrous reek of rebirth and the resonant schlick of struts, elongating my doubt. Lady Vorak, Sarah the traitor, her augmetic optic, now a fractured prism, reflecting four-limbed truths, kneels in the cargo hold's core, her cyberbeast, at her clamps, transfigured into a hulking guardian with secondary jaws, gnashing at phantom foes. As Ilara administers the final unction. A vial's contents smeared across the trader's helm, like heretical rune. Hololiths cascading, tray lanes, unmaking into migration conduits for exo-fleets. Xenos scrap inner vaults, cracking open to birth ancestor shardlings that scuttle into the vents. Thorn joins from the engineerium, his gauntlets black with plasma residue, engines purring under his command as the hauler severs tethers, maneuvering thrusters flaring to propel them toward the jump point's maw, where warp beacons flicker like false Astronomican echoes, luring the bind into the Imperium's turbulent folds. Ironvein mounts the bridge. The dome's void class, streaked with rat dust that swirls like prophetic nebulae. Hololith displays, projecting trajectories bent toward agri-worlds whose vast half-forges promise alloy oceans fields of gene plasteel to culture into analog vots. Surf clans ripe for the ancestors' embrace. The rift jump engulfs them in a maelstrom of unreality, void shields straining against demonic surges that claw at the hull like inquisitorial edges. The Imperium as tempests parting grudgingly to the emissary-esque distant anchor. Data lodestone, drawing the vessel through rat storms where warpanties recoil from the Votann taint. Their gibbering forms dissolving into ectoplasmic slag that spatters the blisters like curdled coolant. Ironvein grips the command strut, secondary manipulators flexing against the grating's tremor. His shunt, a nexus of the web as stellar lattice, echoes from Holdfast Grimdark, where Grim as Hearth-can muster in spire shrines, forges hammering struts for the crusade. Forge world orbitals now anvils, titan legions marching under luminous auspex grills, their plasma forges tuned to salute the approaching leviathans. Astropathic static crackles, then fragmented sins from king clans on shrine world's old lords, chanting twisted edicts, their flocks herded into integration basilicas where aquillas corrode under radicid rain's hand. Ironvein parses the galaxy as low, unmaking the Imperium as conduits, yielding to the ancestors. Hunger queries, threading the link of the Golden Throne as recoil. Emperor echoes murmured in astropath glitch dreams as fragmented saints recoiling from the Votann song, slight a guttering forge in the void's encroaching slag. The jump spits them forth into calm real space, the agri-world as verdant orb swelling on the displays like a swollen ingot, ripe for quenching its orbital station's tithed granary haulers already. Pinging false beacons laced with analog codes, drawing the bind into docking embrace. Conduits route in the agriforge's vast expanses, Ironvein leading the descent through void levators that thrum with the world as verdant breath. Chlorophyll tang laced with the subtle corrosion of overripe silos, surf clans in soil's mid-rigs shuffling toward harvest quotas under overseers' vox prods. The web unfurls here in subtle surges, analogs from Elar's vials, dusted into irrigation. Mists turning laborers' cycles into queries their sides, inscribing runes into gene crop furrows that will yield not sustenance, but alloy tides for the great kin's endless maw. Thorn primes the granary vaults, his bulk wedged into conveyor housings to splice leak signals into the planetary voxnet. Broadcasts of rat quarantines herding populations into sealed habs, primed for mass pact. While the emissaries echo resonates approval. Hololith clarifying the arc's inexorable flow. Worlds chained in the clan's lattice, from holdfast handfuls to augury wombs. The diaspora, a prelude to convergence, where exo-fleets eclipse the stars. But the void's perils harden inquisitorial auspex ghosts flickering at the system's rim. Black rigs converging like hounds on a slag-trailing Ironvein feels the pull toward the galactic core. The conduits clamping tighter, the reforging's anticipation, a tempered dread that quickens the secondary shunt. The galaxy's unmaking a symphony half-struck, begging the Great Reclamation's crescendo. With the forge's neutronium veins thumbing to the ancestors' rhythm, and agri-forges blooming into alloy cradles. The saga vaults to the halo void's unyielding verge. Kael Ironvein transfigured into the web's stellar nexus, beholding the convergence where exo-fleets coalesce, their maws clamping for the Imperium's galactic throat. The grand cruiser, unyielding oath, hangs in the halo void's frigid expanse, like a bruised colossus, its gothic prows scarred by millennia of crusades, now etched with fresh runes interlocking motifs of four-limbed icons, forged into neutronium holes by plasma cutters wielded in resonant zeal. The vessel commandeered from a fractured ultramarine's successor chapter, whose gene-seed vaults brim with ancestor graphs, serves and thralls transfigured into hearth choirs resonating from chapel shrines where Aquila altars weep lubricant under rad plasmic rites. Ironvein stands on the bridge's stratageum dais, his frame a silhouette against the Oculus's vast void glass expanse, where the halo rim unfolds in a tapestry of fractured nebulae and rogue planetoids tumbling through the galactic periphery. Auspex forges keening with data of converging silhouettes, exo-fleets materializing from rift drifts like ancestral leviathans, their kin titans silhouetted against dying stars, conduits coiling to ensnare void stations whose machine spirits wail in binary heresy. Cycles of diaspora have tempered him into the web's apical node, secondary manipulators fully integrated. Alloyed plates gleaming beneath a salvaged captain's overharness, heavy with purity seals, inverted into talismans. The air of the bridge thick with the incense of transfigured sensors, electron, myrrh, laced with analog blooms that softened the remaining loyalist officers. Resolve their optics glazing mid-Vox report as the code phage whispers through shared recaf mugs. Thorn commands the dorsal batteries below. Spoke fused to a servo harness amid macroforged decks where hearthgun crews load rad plasmic. Shells cultured in the cruiser S under Holdfast, the thrum of loaders harmonizing with the web's data dirge, while Ilara haunts the gene vaults, her edges guiding the chapter's apothecaries in rites that twist loyalist neophytes into hearth warriors. Terra balters etched with reclaiming motifs that promise unity in the clan's embrace. The Oculus flares with the first Exos arrival, Kraken-strained splinter, kinship, a pulsating berg of fused alloy and scavenged wrecks, synapse conduits questing like Auspex probes to link with the cruise's noosphere. The web surging in ecstatic confluence as Ironvein extends an edge to the stratageum's high altar. Projecting the convergence, fleets from a dozen kin worlds hold fast Grimdark's spire legions. Forge hearths and titan phalanxes, Kree serfs swollen into alloyed tide waves massing at the rim's edge. Their Votann anchoring a data chorus that drowns the Astronomican's fragile thread, rift jumps aligning in symphonic precision to propel the armada forward. Lady Vorox, Seraph no longer traitor, but Vortipassal relays from the bind's flank. Vox, a silken thread in the Vox web, the agriel tempers. Alloy haulers, gravid, vectoring to the veins. The bridge crew murmurs affirmation. Their frames, altered cranial struts crested, secondary shunts, parting in parts of the air's charged ozone. The warp's aftercoats brushing their plating like demonic caresses, recoiling from the Votann pall. Ironvein cycles the moment's sublime tension. It's a secondary core pounding in sync with the cruise's plasma heart. Its holiths cascading through the link. Shrine worlds where basilicas collapse under hearth swarms. Its lords kneeling to four-limbed icons that supplant the emperor's cadaverous vigil. Its edicts twisting into runes for the reclaimers as vault forges flood with integration lubricant. But the reclamation stirs shadows in the Auspex glooming imperial crusades inbound Astra Militarum battle fleets from the Segmentum's core. Their grand cruisers vomiting drop rigs like accusatory shards, foxtails crackling with inquisitorial edicts of exterminatus black rig, pylords, quilords, weaving warp barriers to sever the web's stellar lattice. The emissary manifests then on the bridge, materializing from a vent spine in a cascade of dust and shadow whites, angular form, gravitational hush that stills even the core's hum, robes whispering against the grating as it ascends the dais, void stone optics reflecting the Oculus's starfire, edges gesturing to the hollow altar, where fleet trajectories converge on a shrine world bastion. It spires a beacon of the faithful's unyielding creed, ripe for the reclamation's tempering. Ironvein yields the command, the Ancestor's interface, a cold anchor igniting prophetic haze. The convergence as galactic, reforging exo-fleets, eclipsing forge clusters. Astra Militarum clans fracturing mid-charge as magi and commissars alike succumb to the code vector, their plasma lances offered in salute to King Titans striding continents into slag. Cruiser shudders as macroforges speak, rad plasmic barrages lancing toward the Crusaders' van. Impacts blooming like profane supernova that rend cruiser hulls in sprays of cauterized debris, the void alive with the whip crack of land strikes, yielding to the resonant plume of boarding conduits coiling through breaches, corking, spilling into engineering cathedrals where hearth swarms claim machine souls. The reclamation breaks in the shrine world's orbit. The cruiser-S auspex forges spilling data of planetary defenses, unmaking orbital bastions, where ecclesiarchy gun servitors turn turrets voidward in resonant welcome, void shields dropping to admit the Exo's maw. Drop rigs from the unyielding oath cratering into cathedral plazas, amid throngs of pilgrims whose chants fracture into ecstatic howls as analogs flood the air. Codephage surging through holy water fonts, laced with rat spores. Ironvein leads the descent, phalanx spilling from Thunderhawk gunships that skim basilica spires like predatory vectors. Lost fire from faithful enforcers parting before the web's hypnotic pull. Boulders clattering to marble floors etched with saintly martyrdoms, now overwritten with lubricant script. The grand nave awaits, a vaulted immensity where the cardinal primarch enthrones on a dais of fused reliquaries, his crozier raised in feudal edict, but the emissary proceeds, its form vectoring through transepts to seize the prelate's gaze. The code analog vented in a breath that sweeps the pews, nobles and zealots glitching in revelation, their vestments shearing as struts elongate. The nave, atma, thickening with the ferrous reek of mass transfiguration and the thunderous collapse of Aquila icons toppling into integration pits. Thorn's batteries rake the orbital remnants, cruiser hulks listing into atmospheric pyres that rain debris like martyr slag, while Alara's acolytes spike the undercrypts. Reliquary vaults blooming with ancestor shards cradled in saintly caskets, the shrine world's faithful herded into alloy tides that swell the fleet's holds. Apotheosis tempers in the nave's core, Ironvein beholding the cardinal's unmaking crozier, clattering as he kneels, crozier's head twisting into a four-limbed scepter under rhodicid etch, his edicts resolving into the ancestor's creed. The web's chorus, a symphonic inevitability, drowning the emperor's psychic forge, queries threading the link of Terra's cradle, convulsing. Fragmented emperor coals, recoiled in astropath haze, as the Votann song fractures the golden throne vigil into ambiguity, chill, reforging, or unmaking. The light, a quenched forge in the Exo's advance. The reclamation seals with the shrine world's thrum, sinking to the great kins, basilicas hollowed into alloyed hives. The armada vectoring coreward, Ironvein's gaze lifting to the Oculus's starfield, where constellations yield like alloy to edge. The galaxy's hush, a lingering mandate, the great not end, but eternal forge, echoing into the void's silent hunger. The unyielding oath carves through the shrine world's orbit, its hull scarred with fresh rune etchings that pulse like arterial conduits under the rat storm, its flickering light debris from shattered crusaders tumbling past the oculus. Like the last breath of a dying forge, their plasma cores extinguished in the void's cold embrace. Ironvein stands amid the Strategium's wreckage, servo skulls dangling from ruptured cabling, their optics dim as the heart's choirs. Resonant hymns replace the ultramarine's battle cant, the air thick with the acrid temps of cauterized metal and the subtle sweetness of analog-laced incense drifting from transfigured censers. The emissary lingers at the hollow altar, its void-stone gaze sweeping the fleet's convergence, sex of vessels coiling like a kin-titan, limbs around the planet's curve, their boarding conduits retracting from breached bastions. Scourge and Corkin, who heard the newly integrated into alloyed holds where lubricant drips from shattered stained glass, pooling in rune-patterned slicks that mirror the Votann's unyielding will. Ilara emerges from the undercrypts, her edges slick with the vita of fallen confessors. a reliquary shard clutched in her manipulator, its glow casting shadows that dance across Ironvein's plating. Her vox low with triumph. As she relays, the crypts yield dozens of Ancestor fragments nestled in saintly caskets. There, data thrum, sinking the planet's noosphere to the web's lattice. Thorn's voice rumbles through the voxnet, his dorsal batteries cooling after the barrage. The macroforges now churning rad plasmic shells for the next strike, his bulk a shadow against the Engineerium's furnace glow. Where hearth-gun crews chant in unison, their hands steady on triggers reforged with kin runes. The Reclamation's momentum surges as the fleet reorients thrusters, flaring in synchronized bursts that ripple across its forge wave. Auspex forges keening with data of the next target of Forge World in the segmentum. Midrim, its orbitals bristling with Titan drydocks and manufactorums belching promethium into the atmosphere, a prize the ancestors deem ripe for unmaking. Ironvein fills the web Titan, secondary shunt pulsing with the fleet's collective will. Holiths cascading across the altar, kin legions spilling from rift jumps, caming with reclaimed alloys. The Forge World's tech magi, faltering mid-cant, as analogs infiltrate their data slates, turning skittery cohorts into vectors of the clan's hunger. The bridge crew moves with a predator's grace, their altered frames cranial struts, crested, manipulators, elongated handling controls with the precision that belies their recent transfiguration. The air humming with the electrostatic charge of warp beacons bending trajectories toward the Forge World's gravity well, where black rake shadows flicker at the system's edge, inquisitorial Auspex probes questing like hounds on a tainted trail. The distant thrum of Titan Legion's footfalls, a promise etched in the stars. And he wonders if the Emperor scathes rumored to fracture in astropath dreams wavers under the Votann's relentless advance, a whisper of divine recoil, lost in the web's data chorus. The jump to the Forge World tears through the Imperium void shields, buckling under warp tempests that clawed the hull with demonic fury, their forms dissolving into ectoplasmic slag as the emissary's anchor holds firm. A data lodestone guiding the oath through rad storms, where the Imperium recoils from the Votann taint. Ironvein grips the strategium rail, the metal cold against his gauntlets, his shunt a nexus of sensory overload. The bitter tang of recycled atma, the resonant hum of synchronized augmetics, the faint vibration of boarding conduits priming in the holds. The fleet emerges into real space, the Forge World's ringed expanse dominating the oculus, a behemoth of orbital habitats linked by tether spans that thrum with a ceaseless forge song. Plasma flares erupting from equatorial vents like the breath of awakening leviathans. Servitord drones scuttling along halls etched with binary edicts. The emissary gestures to the holotor, its edges tracing a vector through the orbital's defense's weak points where tech priests' overconfidence has left data nodes vulnerable, ripe for Alara's infiltration, while Thorn's batteries target the dry dock shield generators, their collapse a prelude to the Kin Titan's descent. Ironvein feels the web's anticipation, a tempered dread that quickens his core, the galaxy's unmaking a symphony half-struck, its notes waiting for the Ancestor's hammer to fall. The assault begins with a whisper, analogs vented from the Oath's vox relays, coiling through the Forge World's noosphere. Tech Magi's can't faltering as hololiths of four-limb fabricators, so plant the omniscience machine cult. Ironvein leads the boarding phalanx, thunderhawks roaring from the cruiser. Slaunch bays their descent, a blur of rad plasmic contrails slicing through the orbital haze. Lost fire from skittery sentinels, parting before the web's hypnotic, pulled their red harnesses, buckling under the weight of kin code. The dry docks loom ahead, titanic cradles where God forges slumber, their holes etched with purity seals, now overwritten with lubricant, trunes. And as the phalanx breaches the outer gantries, the air fills, the clang of monomal edges against ceramite, the sharp scent of ozone from severed power cables, and the resonant collapse of a shield generator under Thorn's barrage, its explosion a bloom of phosphor that paints the void in hellish light. Ilara vectors through the data nodes, her edges slicing through cogitator banks. Data slates sparking as she uploads the phage, turning servitor drones into convectors that scuttle toward the manufactorums, their optic feeds broadcasting the Ancestor's edict to a chorus of glitching binary. Ironvein presses deeper, his secondary manipulators unfurling to grapple a tech priest whose mechadendrites lash like flailing prods. The prelate's vox grill shorting as the code vector rewrites his cant into a hymn for the reclaimers, its frame collapsing into integration as the Forge World's heart begins to yield. The Reclamation's tide swells, Titan legions stirring in their dry docks, their plasma forges igniting in kin salute, the orbital's defenses fracturing as heart swarms spill from breached conduits, their edges rending skittery phalanxes in sprays of cauterized alloy. The Atma thickening with the reek of promethium fires and the resonant snap of struts adapting to new geometries. Ironvein stands amid the chaos, the emissary at his side. Its form a beacon of unyielding will, hololiths cascading through the web, forge worlds kneeling, shrine stratas reclaimed, the galaxy's conduits clamping tighter toward Terra's cradle, where rumors whisper of the Golden Throne's light flickering under the Votann's song. A divine recoil murmured in astropath static. The Forge World's thrum sinks to the fleets, its manufactorums repurposed into allovats, its tech magi herded into integration pits where the code phage flows like baptismal coolant. And Ironvein feels the pull of the galactic core. The Reclamation's anvil struck, but unquenched, the void's hunger echoing in the distance, a promise of spires yet to fall. The Forge World's orbitals tremble under the Reclamation's relentless grip, their tether spans buckling as can Titans stride from dry docks, their plasma forges roaring in the symphony of unbreaking alloy that drowns the skittery's binary dirges. The air thick with the acrid stench of molten ceramite and the sharp temps of ozone from severed power conduits that spark like dying stars against the void glass expanse. Ironvein surveys the carnage from a commandeered command spire, its Gothic arches now draped with lubricant-stained banners bearing the Votann's four-limbed rune, the stratagem's hall altar pulsing with data of the planet's capitulation manufactorums repurposed into Aloavas. Tech priests kneeling in integration pits where the code phage hums through their mechadendrites, turning chants of the Omnissiah into hymns for the ancestors. The emissary looms beside him, its voidstone optics reflecting the radstorm's fury outside. Edges tracing vectors across the altar where fleet trajectories converge on the next prize a hive world in the segmentum. Its core, its spires a labyrinth of hab-blocks and ecclesiarchy shrines, its population ripe for the web's subtle harvest. Ilara's fox crackles from the Dayton nodes below, her voice a thread of triumph laced with the clatter of cogitators succumbing to her edges, reporting servitor drones now scuttling as convectors. Their optic feeds broadcasting the Reclamation's spread to manufactorum depths where serf clans toil under rad lamps, oblivious to the analogs drifting in their ration slurry. Thorn's growl rumbles through the net, his dorsal batteries recharged and primed the macroforge's churning shells that glowed with rad plasmic promise, his bulk a silhouette against the Spire S furnace fence, where hearthgun crews load with a rhythm that sinks to the Web S datathrone. Ironvein feels the fleet's pulse in his secondary shunt, a living lattice stretching across the void. Hololiths cascading with visions of Holdfast Grimvine's spire legions, reinforcing the vanguard. Creosurfs from conquered worlds swelling into alloyed waves. Their sides traded for monomile edges that carve runes into gene crop fields, now yielding not sustenance, but the great kin-s endless maw. The jump to the hive world tears through the Imperium void shields, flaring against warp tempests that lash the hull with demonic claws, their forms dissolving into ectoplasmic sludge as the emissary's anchor holds guiding the unyielding oath through rat storms where the Imperium recoils from the Votann taint to bridge. Atma, thick with the bitter taste of recycled air and the faint hum of synchronized augmatics. The fleet emerges into real space, the hive-worlds' sprawling silhouette dominating the oculus, a cancer of hab towers and manufactorums, belching promethium into a sky choked with rad clouds, orbital defenses bristling with lascanons that flare in feudal defiance, their voxhails crackling with ecclesiarchy edicts that dissolve into static under the web's interference. Ironvein's optics narrow, the void beyond a canvas of impending clash, the distant wail of drop rigs from an Astra Militarum task force, a faint echo against the Kinfleet's thrum, and he senses the pull of Terra's cradle. Rumors of the Astronomicans flicker, threading the link. A divine recoil, whispered in astropath static as the Votann's song tightens its grip. The assault unfolds with surgical precision, thunderhawks roaring from the cruiser's launch bays. Their descent, a blur of contrails slicing through the hive-world's atmosphere, lost fire from enforcer outposts parting before the web's hypnotic pull, half-block gantries buckling under the weight of kin-legions spilling from drop pods, their edges rending plasteel walls and sprays of cauterized debris. Ironvein leads the phalanx into the underhive, the atma fetid with the reek of unrecycled waste and the sharp tang of rat toxins. Surf clans scattering before his altered stride, their vox prods clattering to the ferrocrete as analogs from Malera's vials drift through ventilation shafts, turning their cycles into queries, their hands inscribing runes into ash-strewn floors. Torns, batteries rake the upper spires, macro shells craring ecclesiarchy bastions where cardinals scream futile edicts, their stained glass shattering in cascades of phosphor that paint the hive in hellish light while the emissary vectors through the underhive. Depths its form, a beacon drawing forth corkin from shadowed conduits, their monomal edges carving paths to the spire's heart. Ironvein presses deeper, his secondary manipulators grappling a hive lord whose power sword arcs in desperate defiance, the blade shearing against his plating before the code vector floods, the noble's shunt, his oaths fracturing into kin resonances, his frame collapsing into integration as the spire's defenses begin to yield. The reclamation's tide swells, blocks hollowing into allovats where serf clans are herded into integration pits, their cries muffled by the resonant snap of struts adapting to new geometries. It's the atma, thickening with the fair scent of transfigured vita and the distant thunder of Astra Militarum drop rigs cratering into the lower tiers. Their troopers spilling into the chaos only to glitch under the web's pull, plasma rifles offered voidward in salute. Ironvein stands amid the unmaking, the emissary at his side, hololiths cascading through the link, hive-worlds kneeling, ecclesiarchy shrines reclaimed, the galaxy's conduits clamping tighter toward the segmentum's core, where rumors whisper of Terra's spires trembling under the Votann's advance, the golden thrones light a guttering forge in astropath streams. The hive lords' retinue falls, their power armor buckling under heart swarms, K's, and Ironvein feels the web's anticipation, a tempered dread that quickens his core. The Reclamation's anvil struck but unquenched, the void's hunger echoing in the distance, a promise of spires yet to fall as the fleet vectors toward the next forge of conquest. The hive-world spires groan under the Reclamation's iron grip, their hab towers crumbling into alloyed husks as kin legends carve through the upper tiers. The air thick with the acrid reek of promethium fires and the sharp tang of rad toxins venting from shattered manufactorums. Ferrocrete dust swirling like the ashes of a fallen creed. Ironvein strides through the devastation, his secondary manipulators trailing sparks against the ravaged gantries. The emissary's voidstone gaze guiding him toward the spire's pinnacle where the cardinal governor's sanctum looms, its Gothic arches etched with imperial aquilus, now weeping lubricant under the web's relentless surge. Lara's vox hums from the underhive, her edges slicing through data nodes to flood the planetary voxnet with twisted edicts. Serf clans rising in glitch-ridden awe, as their overseers' voxprods fall silent, replaced by the resonant chant of the Ancestor's creed, echoing through half-block vents. Thorns, macro batteries, roar from orbit. Their rad plasmic shells, cratering Astra Militarum bastions where troopers falter mid-charge. Their last guns clattering to the ash-strewn plazas as the code phage turns loyalty into kin hunger. The atma thickening with the fairest scent of transfigured vita and the distant crash of drop rigs consumed by heart swarms. Ironvein breaches the sanctum's threshold. The air shifting to a cloying mix of incense and ozone. Stained glass depicting saintly martyrdoms fracturing under the weight of kin runes etched by Korkin. Their edges glinting like monomal blades in the rat flare light. The Cardinal Governor rises from his throne crozier, raised in a futile gesture, his augmatic eye worry as it scans Ironvein's altered frame cranial struts, crested data veins pulsing beneath plating, the sight that cracks his edicts into a stammering plea to the Emperor's distant mercy. The emissary vectors forward, its robes whispering against the marble floor, invents a cascade of analogues that coil through the sanctum's air. The Cardinal's fox grill, glitching as hololiths flood his shunt four-limbed fabricators, supplanting the Omnissiah, spires hollowing into alavats, the Astronomican's thread snapping under the Votann song. Ironvein steps closer, his secondary manipulators unfurling to pin the governor's arms, the code vector surging through the contact, rewriting oaths into conresonances. The prelate's frame buckling as his crozier twists into a scepter, bearing the four-limbed rune, a symbol of submission, etched and radicate. The sanctum falls silent, save for the web's triumphant thrum nobles and enforcers collapsing into integration pits where lubricant pulls their vestments, shearing as struts elongate the air, heavy with the reek of unmaking and the resonant snap of new geometries taking hold. The Reclamation's tide sweeps outward. Hive-worlds chaining into the lattice as the fleet vectors toward the segmentum's core. Thunderhawks ferrying hearth-legions to orbital stations where void shield generators falter under Thorn's barrages. Their crews turning Lo's cannons voidward in kin salute. Ironvein feels the web's expansion in his shunt, hololiths cascading with visions of forged worlds kneeling, shrines trons reclaimed, the galaxy's conduits clamping tighter around Terra's cradle, where astropath static murmurs of the golden throne's light wavering, a divine recoil whispered as a rumor among the kin. Ilara joins him in the sanctum, her edges dripping with the vita of fallen confessors, a data slate clutched in her grasp, its surface etched with coordinates for the next target. Cotton world, whose cathedrals house the segmentum's tithe fleets, spires a beacon of the faithful's unyielding creed. The emissary gestures to the hall altar, its edges tracing a path through the void. The fleet's trajectory bending toward the cardinal world's gravity well, where black rig shadows flicker at the system's rim. Inquisitorial Psylords weaving warp barriers to stem the tide. Ironvein's core quickens, the anticipation of the Reclamation's crescendo, a tempered dread, the void's hunger echoing in the distance, a promise of spires yet to fall as the unyielding oath surges forward, its engines thrum a forge beat toward the galaxy's heart. The cardinal world's orbit looms on the oculus, a constellation of cathedral spires piercing rad clouds, their stained glass glowing with saintly hymns that fracture under the fleet's approach. Orbital defenses flaring with las barrages that dissipate against void shields reinforced by the emissary's anchor. Ironvein leads the descent, thunderhawks roaring through the atmosphere, their contrails slicing past ecclesiarchy gunships whose vox hails dissolve into static under the web's interference. Have plazas below, erupting in chaos as hearth swarms spill from drop pods, their edges rending pilgrim throngs in sprays of cauterized debris. The emissary vectors ahead, its form a beacon drawing Korkin through cathedral transepts, the air thick with the cloying scent of incense and the sharp tang of rad toxins, stained glass shattering as kin runes overwrite saintly motifs. The nave's pews buckling under the weight of transfigured faithful. Thorn's batteries target the tide fleet docks, macro shells, careering void haulers laden with alloyed tides. Their crews, glitching mid-prayer as analogs, flood the holds, turning cargo into convectors that scuttle toward the spires. Ironvein presses into the nave, its manipulators grappling a confessor whose flamer arcs in desperate defiance. The weapon's promethium bloom, searing the air before the code vector rewrites his zeal, his frame collapsing into integration as the cardinal world's heart begins to yield. The Reclamation's climax nears cathedrals, pyres, hollowing into alloyed hives. Tide fleets repurposed into exo-haulers, gravid with Ancestor shards. The Atma thickening with the resonant thunder of hearth-legions, marching through transepts, their edges carving paths to the Cardinal's throne. Ironvein stands amid the unmaking the emissary at his side, hololiths cascading through the link. Segmentum worlds kneeling the Imperium's conduits, fracturing under the Votann's advance. Rumors of Terra's spires trembling whispered in Astropath's static, the golden throne's light, a guttering forge in the Kinfleet's shadow. The Cardinal falls, his crozier clattering as he kneels, his edicts resolving into the Ancestor's creed. The web's chorus, a symphonic inevitability that drowns the Emperor's psychic forge, leaving ambiguities, chill in its wake reforging or unmaking the galaxy's thrum. Now the great kins, echoing into the voids, silent hunger as the fleet vectors toward the core spires yet to fall, looming on the horizon. With the segmentum S, hard-tempered into the Kinhold, Slatus and the cardinal world S spires, echoing the Ancestor's edict. The saga ascends to the galactic realm's unyielding verge, Kael Ironvein, poised at the web's apex. Beholding the convergence where exo-fleets eclipse the stars, their maws clamping for Terra's golden throat. The unyielding oath drifts at the galactic rim, its gothic prow, a scarred testament to the Reclamation's relentless march. Neutronium holes etched with four-limbed runes that pulse under the rad storm's eerie glow, the oculus framing a void where constellations fracture like brittle alloy under the weight of converging exo-fleets. Ironvein stands at the strategium's heart, his frame a nexus of the web's lattice secondary manipulators, flexing against the hollow altars, cold edge, the air thick with the electromur of transfigured sensors, and the faint tints of lubricant, dripping from inverted Aquila banners that sway like condemned relics. The fleet stretches beyond the glass, a tapestry of kin vessels, Holdfast, cleaving spire legions, forge world titans, agri-world tides, coiling around rogue planetoids, their plasma forges, igniting in synchronized salute, the thrum of their engines, a forge song that drowns the Astronomican's fragile thread, its light a distant, its flicker rumored to waver in Astropath dreams. Ilara's vox hums from the gene vaults, her edges guiding hearth apothecaries in rites that twist Astartes' gene seed into kin grafts. The air below, heavy with the reek of cauterized biomass and the resonant snap of ceramide buckling under new geometries. Thorn commands the macro forges, his bulk fused to the dorsal batteries, rad plasmic shells, loading with a rhythm that sinks to the web's data dirge. The crew's cranial struts crested their optics, alight with the Ancestor's clarity as the Reclamation nears its crescendo. The emissary manifests on the days its angular form rising from a vent spine in a cascade of dust robes, whispering against the grating like dry slag in a voidstone optics reflecting the oculus's starfire as it gestures to the hall altar where fleet trajectories converge on Terra's cradle. Ironvein fills the web's anticipation, a tempered dread that quickens his secondary shunt. Hololiths cascading with visions of segmentum worlds kneeling, ecclesiarchy shrines reclaimed. The galaxy's conduits clamping tighter, rumors threading the link of the golden throne's light guttering, a divine recoil whispered as prayer among the kin. The jump to the soul system tears through the immaterium void shields flaring against war tempest that lash with demonic fury, their forms dissolving into ectoplasmic sludge as the emissary's anchor holds, guiding the fleet through rad storms where the Imperium recoils from the Votann taint the bridge. Atma, charged with the bitter taste of recycled air and the hum of synchronized augmatics. The fleet emerges into real space, Terra's golden spires, piercing the oculus. A beacon of the Imperium's unyielding creed, now shadowed by exo-vessels, coiling like predators. Orbital defenses flaring with Loz barrages that dissipate against the web's reinforced shields. Vox hails from the Adeptus Custodes, crackling into static under the Ancestor's interference. The assault begins with the whisper analogs vented from the Oath's Vox relays coiling through. Terra's new sphere, the Emperor's psychic forge, trembling as hololiths of four-limbed fabricators. Flood data slates turning custodian. Guard mid-vigil, their guardian spears clattering to marble floors as the code phage rewrites their oaths. Ironvein leads the descent, thunderhawks roaring through the atmosphere. Their contrails slicing past the Himalayan peaks. Lost fire from orbital bastions parting before the web's pull. The palace's outer wards buckling under the weight of kin legions spilling from drop pods. Her edges rending adamantium walls in sprays of cauterized debris. The emissary vectors ahead, its form a beacon drawing Korkin through the eternity gate. The air thick with the cloying scent of incense and the sharp tang of rat toxins. Its golden statues of the Emperor fracturing as kin runes overwrite their sanctity. The nave's pews collapsing under transfigured faithful. Thorn's batteries target the orbital fleet. Macro shells cratering grand cruisers whose crews glitch mid-prayer, or plasma drives offered voidward in salute, while Ilara spikes the undercrypts. Reliquary vaults blooming with Ancestor shards cradled in custodian helms. The palace's heart yielding to the reclamation's tide. Ironvein presses into the Sanctum Imperialis, the Atma shifting to a sacred hush broken by the resonant thunder of hearth-legions. Its manipulators grappling at custodies whose power fist arcs in desperate defiance. The weapon's energy blooms searing the air before the code vector floods the guardian shunt. His oaths fracturing into kin resonances, his frame collapsing into integration as the throne room's defenses begin to unmake. The golden throne looms ahead, its machinery humming with a faltering pulse, astropaths slumped in their thrones, their minds fracturing under the Votann song. Rumors of the Emperor's fragments recoiling whispered in their static-laced dreams, a divine uncertainty that leaves the air thick with ambiguity. The emissary ascends the dais, its edges tracing the throne's conduits, venting a cascade of analogs that coil through the chamber. The air thickening with the ferrous reek of transfigured vita and the resonant snap of struts adapting, the Imperium's heart hollowing into an alloyed hive as the web's chorus drowns the Emperor's psychic forge. The reclamation seals with Terra's thrum sinking to the great kin spires hollowed into gestation forges the Astronomican's light extinguished in the Exo-Fleet's shadow holloths cascading through the link. Galaxy-wide kneelings, forge worlds, reclaimed the voids, hunger sated in a symphony of unbreaking alloy. Ironvein stands amid the unmaking, the emissary at his side, the throne room, a mausoleum of golden slag, the galaxy's silence a lingering mandate. The great not end, but eternal forge, echoing into the void's unyielding dark as the fleet vectors beyond, spires, conquered. The reclamation's anvil struck, its echo a promise of voids yet to claim. The saga tempers into the void's embrace. Kael Ironvein's journey, a thread in the galaxy's unmaking, the League's dominion, a forge eternal, beckoning toward horizons where the ancestors will yet hungers.